everybody, my name is Jenny and we are going to review Traitors, episode 2 today. Here we go.
Welcome to my castle.
Okay, so we open up revealing who is the traitor that they picked to join them, and it is Parvati. Parvati. P-A-R-V-A-T-I, right? Okay, yes, I think her name is Parvati. P-A-R-V-A-T-I. Although people are pronouncing it with 2 R's, and that's what's tripping me up. They're pronouncing it like Parvati, which is easier to say, but I'm going to try to pronounce it correctly based on the way it's spelled. Okay, so she is the traitor that gets joined in. She knows she's a traitor. She doesn't know who the other traitors are until the very end of the day. So she goes throughout the day, they were really impressed that she didn't reveal that she was a traitor, but what do you do to reveal that you're a traitor? You're just participating like everybody else, and you want to win like everybody else. So I don't think it would be that hard to make it a day without letting people know you just found out you're the traitor. Unless you're just like the kind of person that just wears all their emotions on their sleeves and you walk around going, I mean, anybody that's been on any of these reality TV shows are familiar with having to act, so no big deal. So at breakfast is when people find out who got killed the night before because they don't show up for breakfast, right? They get killed in the dead of night and they don't arrive to breakfast the next day. And breakfast, usually they release people out of their rooms to come down to breakfast in like groups of 4 or so. And so they'll knock on the door and then 4 more people come in and everyone's like, hey, you're alive. And then 4 more people come in, yay. Then they start hypothesizing, who do you think was killed? People were surprised that both Marcus and Larsa were both there. I mean, I kind of am too. I would have kept Marcus and gotten rid of Larsa just because she seems to be loud and have a big mouth, which could be a problem, I think, in this game for her not like continuing to share a bunch of information with people. But I don't know. Again, I'm new to all of this. If I was randomly chosen to be a traitor, I would have been like, let's get rid of her because he just doesn't say nearly as much. And so he seems like he's less of a threat. And they're definitely going to be sharing information with each other. So people find out that Johnny Bananas is the one that was killed. He doesn't show up to breakfast. So he was the first one killed, which shocked everybody because they thought that he would stay because the challenges are physical and you need strong players to help you get the money for the pot. In Johnny Bananas' interview, after he left, he said, the house is going to be a lot less fun now that I'm not around. Yeah, I wrote, he does not seem like a fun guy. Again, they love to pick people who are full of themselves, but I guess that's the nature of the people that are on these shows, right? Yeah. In a whole party room, you'd be the person I would be avoiding, Johnny Bananas. So, yeah, not the fun guy. And he didn't seem fun, and he didn't say anything funny. Like, funny guys, that would be one thing I'd want to keep around because they're entertaining. He wasn't funny, and he wasn't fun. But he thinks he is. So the night before, there was this benign interaction where a bunch of ladies were sitting around in the room together. Maybe there were guys in there too, I can't recall. There were probably about 5 or 6 people sitting around on couches. And Trishelle said, if I'm not here tomorrow, you know it's Peppermint. And I think it was something to do with their clothing. Like Trishelle's like, I don't want to be voted off yet because I brought a bunch of really cute outfits and I want to wear them. And then Peppermint said, yes, me too. I have a whole bunch too. So I guess the joke is that if Peppermint were the traitor, he would vote off Trishelle because she has good clothes and maybe Peppermint doesn't want to compete with her. I guess that's the joke that Trishelle was trying to get across. I mean, I don't know. It's not funny, whatever it was. But it was just a comment. And Peppermint was like, what? What? And she was laughing, and they're like, it's a joke. And then that was the end of it. Trishelle could not let this go. She's talking to everybody about this interaction. Do you know what she said? She just like, or I made this joke, and she just looked at me like, what? Like she got revealed. If she got revealed, I don't think she would have been that animated. Or she'd be a really bad traitor. So the whole premise of it seemed wrong. I just wrote down here that she constantly seems like she's making a mountain out of a molehill. I don't understand why this was a big deal, but it became a big deal because I guess they just didn't have anything else to talk about and they were just grasping at straws. Or maybe Trishelle was just game playing and making all this up and trying to make it into a big deal. I mean, it puts a target on your own back too, because then people don't like you. So I don't know if it was smart gameplay, if that's what she was doing. But at any rate, I put a note here that I wouldn't want Peppermint on my bad side. Peppermint seems like she's a fun person to hang around with, but you wouldn't want her to be your enemy. So Marcus and CJ are now suspecting Peppermint because of this story. Tamara is suspecting John simply because he's a politician, because of his career. Like the flimsiest reason of all. Like people are trying to gain like actual facts and talk to people and see if people are slipping in that. And she's like, I don't trust it. He's a politician. It's like, okay, it's funny if she was just trying to tell a joke, but I don't know if she's actually serious about it or not. Didn't seem like the brightest thing to say. Sandra had a very interesting comment where she said that she's going to be sniffing around Parvati to see if she slips up at all. Because if she sniffs out that Parvati is at all a traitor, she's going to get all the faithfuls together and vote her out right away. Because Sandra and Parvati do not get along. And they were at odds. And I think Sandra won one of the seasons. One of the 2 seasons she won was like, it was down neck and neck between her and Parvati. Maybe that's the one I watched, where I ended up liking Sandra because I didn't like Parvati, but I don't know. So then we have a challenge for episode number 2 where they have to go running down these paths. They have 3 different colors of shirts, flannel shirts. They're going to go eventually to a scarecrow patch. And on the way, there are 2 scarecrows that would stop them with a question. And the question, the answer could be one of either 2 scarecrows, and the scarecrows had the names of 2 different contestants that were on the show on there. So the first question as they go running, and they had 3 different paths to run, and they all ended up in this field of scarecrows at the end. Now, the answers to all these questions, before I go on, are based on questionnaires that they all had to fill out earlier that day, the day before, I don't know. At some point, they had to fill out questionnaires, answering questions about themselves and about the participants, and making choices on who they liked. All right, or who they thought best answered the question. All right, so these are basically a poll of your constituents, your local participants. All right, I have written here first though. John was so funny. John runs with like T-Rex arms. He runs fast, but has T-Rex arms.
We're definitely not Olympians. We're more like the Bad News Bears.
I need my inhaler. John, are you sure you don't have an inhaler?
In the fast running, that becomes an issue in terms of people suspecting him later on. The first question was, whose opinion do you value most? And I believe the choices were Marcus and Larsa. And all 3 teams chose Marcus, and Marcus was the correct answer. They carry the scarecrow to the next lockbox, use the key on the scarecrow to unlock the lockbox, which has another question. If the lock doesn't come open, they've chosen the wrong thing. They have to run back at the other scarecrow that had a different key around its neck, carry that scarecrow, and then undo it. So it becomes physically demanding and time consuming if you choose incorrectly. All 3 teams chose Marcus. All 3 teams were right. They move on to question number 2. Question number 2, who's the most popular player? Is it Deontay or Peppermint? All the groups pretty unanimously said Deontay. You'd hear random Peppermint. I think Peppermint. But then people were like, oh, it's got to be Deontay. Deontay, definitely Deontay. Definitely Deontay. If I had to choose between the 2, I would have chose Peppermint. Just because I know RuPaul's Drag Race is a very popular show. And I may have seen Peppermint on other things. Like, again, I used to watch Andy Cohen's Watch What Happens live religiously. I haven't watched it in about a year, but I used to watch it all the time. I don't know when I had more time on my hands. I don't know how I had more time on my hands in the past. But anyway, Deontay, not once in my life would I come across the guy. So for me personally, I'm thinking, I know boxing is popular, but really, I can't think of anyone in my family who would know who Deontay is. Maybe my husband does. So I'm thinking Peppermint. Of course, the groups all choose Deontay. Peppermint's group, they ask her, who do you think? And of course, she's like, I think myself. I can't argue with her in this. I mean, she's comparing the two, and she admitted it's a shady question. The answer was Peppermint. Here's where I'm confused. These were questions they all answered. So figuring out the majority should be easy. Let's do a vote here. We all answered this question on a questionnaire earlier. Who do we think between the two of them is the most popular? It's not who you like the most. It's not like you're going to hurt their feelings, even if Peppermint or Deontay's in your group. You could just be like, Deontay were my group. I'm like, I'm sure you're a great guy. Just never heard your name before. Have I heard Peppermint's? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, because all the drag race queens have names like that. So, it's not something that would stick in my head. It would just be like, Chuckles and Peppermint and Lipstick and whatever. I don't know. So how is it that all three groups got it incorrect? How can that be? Do you think that production was just messing with them and that people voted for other people and that they just decided to make it Peppermint? Because it seems like an impossibility to me if that was the answer that was the majority, that at least one of the groups would have enough people in it that the majority of them would say, no, it's got to be Peppermint. Even the group with Peppermint in it didn't choose Peppermint. I mean, they did, and then they didn't. They put it down, and then anyway. I find something fishy about that when it comes to the whole production. The next question was, who needs to speak up more? And the choices were Sheree or Dan. And all three groups agreed that Dan needs to speak up more, which is a huge red flag to Dan. And shocking to me, because I was assuming that Dan, being this great big brother player who backstabbed or did whatever, I thought he was going to be very conniving and working the room and all that stuff. And he said his strategy was going to be the layback, but he said nothing to anybody. He just sits and listens. And I'm thinking that's a terrible strategy for somebody who was so successful at game playing. You have to blend in. And by saying nothing, you're not blending in. So here's an example. Now there's a target on his back because everyone thinks, oh, he's the man who's not saying anything. Why? Are you a traitor? Now, everyone's suspecting that John, the politician, is a traitor because at the original round table, when they were choosing the traitor, whoever was sitting next to him said that at one point he started breathing really heavily. And they were thinking he was breathing really heavily because the traitor Alan Cummings touched his shoulder to indicate he's a traitor. And then he had a visceral excited or nervous or whatever reaction to it, started breathing heavily. So they were trying to call him out because of that. And he said, I have slight asthma. Because I remember him saying slight or very little. I think it was slight that he used. Because I remember thinking, that's an odd way to say you have asthma. Like you have asthma or you don't have asthma. But I guess you could slightly have asthma. He's like, I'm slightly asthmatic. And that's why I was breathing heavily. The whole thing was just, your eyes were covered and there was a lot of anxiety and tension going on. That's why I was breathing heavily. Whereas during this whole competition, they're running the whole time, and he's running really fast with his little T-Rex arms. So cute, actually. It was very funny. It was very cute the way he runs. And he seemed fine. And to test it out, Tamara, which I thought was very brilliant, giving her credit for this, she says to him, I'm having a hard time breathing. John, do you have an inhaler? I don't know what she would have done with it if you got it. I wouldn't want to use an inhaler if you don't need to. But he's like, no, I don't have an inhaler on me. And she points out, if you're asthmatic, you would be carrying an inhaler on you during these competitions. Maybe true, maybe not. Production might be carrying an inhaler, although he could have said, ask production, they have my inhaler. Anyway, he said he didn't. And it was a red flag. I will agree with that. Now, we know, I found this odd. Okay, let me just sidestep now. I found it odd that we know who all the traitors are, that there's not one under the cloak of night that the audience isn't, that it's not revealed to. I didn't like that we had all that information at the beginning. I felt like I wanted to kind of try to figure it out a little bit along with everybody else. I mean, I would have been like, yeah, John's totally a traitor. That was a big lie right there. I would have never believed the whole, I have supersonic hearing and I heard the vibrations of a sleeve move. Nah, that I wouldn't have believed. Larsa, no. But he admitted he was breathing heavily and he said that he was slightly asthmatic, but then he is doing this huge challenge and not carrying an inhaler with him, and he's not breathing hard. So I think it would have been fun for the viewer to be like, oh, I think he's a traitor. But that's not how they choose to do it. That's fine. There is another show that you don't know. You get little bits. This is what I was thinking of. There's a show called Claim to Fame on Hulu. Amazing. Good show. And I will review the next time a season of that comes out because it's so good. They've had 2 seasons. And they give you some of the information in terms of who people you're trying to figure out who the people are related to that are famous. And they give you some of the information on some of them, but other ones you don't get, or they withhold it for longer periods of time. So you're trying to solve the puzzles and figure it out along with the contestants. Yet you know the answers to some of them, so it makes it fun. I don't know. I just think that was a better way to do it. I think this show would be better if we didn't have all that information, but that's okay. My opinion. All right, so after the challenge, they get a bunch of money at the challenge. Some people get shields too. I can't remember. I think Dan got a shield at this one. I didn't write it down. So he's protected. It doesn't matter. He's the traitor. Well, that's not true. They could still vote for him, couldn't they? Even though he's the traitor. And then he would be voted out and have to say, yeah, I'm the traitor. So, yeah, so Dan, he said he just did it to make it look like he's not the traitor and needs protection. But in reality, when you think about it, they could have all voted for him anyway, right? So he did need it. He did need it because he was just called out in the last game. All right. So we get to the end of the episode. They're all at the round table and everybody gets to vote on who they think is the traitor, is one of the traitors anyway in the group. And there's a lot of discussion going around. Peppermint's name comes out. She's defending herself, saying this is ridiculous. Some other people are chiming in and agreeing with that. Sheree agreed with that. So I can't remember who. There was 2 people who were like, yeah, I don't understand why this is a big deal. Max, I think, was one. I don't understand why this is such a big deal. The John thing seems more significant to me. That seemed like facts. He said he had asthma. Now he's running this whole race without having difficult breathing at all. So I would have voted for John. I would have been wrong, but I would have voted for John. Basically, it ended up being John, Peppermint, and Trishelle in the hot seat. In the end, Peppermint got voted out. She gave a nice little speech at the end as she was leaving. After this, Deontay got hit very hard by it. He was really emotionally affected by Peppermint leaving because he was one that agreed and kind of joined on the bandwagon of like, yeah, this story doesn't jive with Peppermint and voted Peppermint out. And he perceived it as herd mentality going after Peppermint. What he didn't take into consideration is it's a game, and that is part of the game. It's gathering a bunch of information and getting a bunch of people to vote for somebody. It's terrible in the real world. It becomes bullying or whatnot, but this is part of the game. Somebody has to be voted out, and so you need to convince other people to agree with you, or you need to jump on the bandwagon with somebody else so that you're voting as a group block and you're not like out completely on your own and people think you're not a team player or whatever. You could vote differently, but you have to have a justification for it. So I was surprised at how emotional he was. I mean, I felt like he said that in the past he was in that place. So again, he couldn't separate the game from reality at all. And he felt like he basically, with a herd mentality, kind of ganged up on somebody who didn't deserve it. And he just related to that personally. So it was a touching moment, but then I also thought, like, I hope they have psychologists on hand and producers that can talk to them and go, like, it's okay. You didn't do anything wrong. It's a game, and she's okay. And you're going to talk to her when you get out, and everything's going to be fine. So anyway, Marcus, who does seem quite smart, pointed out that they need to start paying attention to who are the people at that round table who really didn't contribute or say anything, because they're likely to be the traitors. And sure enough, the 3 traitors said almost nothing at that round table. So that was very astute of Marcus for sure. MJ chimed in and she agreed we have to pay attention to all the people who are quiet in the room. But on top of people now paying attention to who didn't speak, there was some backlash against Trishelle, who was the one that kept pointing out that this reaction of Peppermint was very odd and eventually led to Peppermint leaving, and Peppermint was not a traitor in the end. So Trishelle was wrong this whole time. She was getting some backlash from people who, and then I think she also just felt bad about it. And so she ended up in tears and she ended up walking off. And at the very end of this episode, we have Marcus talking to Dan specifically saying, Dan, you're not saying anything in these groups, which is making you look very suspicious. And Dan tried to explain, he's like, listen, I am a shy person. I'm a quiet person. And there's so many people talking. It's hard to get a word in edgewise. So, and Marcus is like, yeah, okay. I don't know. Like, I think you could get a word in edgewise. We'd like to hear a word from you, Dan, please. So Dan, I think, is getting more and more on the hot seat. Here I'm thinking he was going to run this game and he was going to control Parvati and Phaedra. But, I mean, it's looking more and more like he's screwing up by not talking. And as it's going on, I'm starting to think he's not the outgoing, gregarious, conniving, backstabbing kind of personality that I just assumed he was for being tagged and labeled as like making the greatest, biggest move in Big Brother history. Because the episodes that I watch, and again, I tend to watch just celebrity Big Brother, there are pretty big personalities in there, and usually one of the big ones is the one that wins in the end. I've only seen 1 or 2 regular Big Brothers, and it was so long ago. Don't even remember. So Dan is going to have to change his strategy and open his mouth. And if he truly is a shy person in that, he's going to have to learn to come out of his shell because he's looking like a traitor. And I don't know if everyone has seen his season. So, like, just from my point of view, if everybody else hasn't seen his season of Big Brother and they know that he was somebody who was very successful at, like, throwing things, doing the greatest backstabbing or whatever it is he did. I don't know. I didn't see it. But I can't remember how they described it when they introduced him. But I would expect him to be a big personality too. And if he was sitting there really quiet, I would think, something's up. That doesn't seem like the kind of person who just had the biggest win of Big Brother. So we'll see what happens with that in the future. All right. That's all I have for episode 2. I am going to come back another day with my review of episode 3. Keep watching. And if you are stumbled upon these videos, but you're not watching Traitors, watch Traitors. Then come back and watch this. I recommend it. I really do. Go watch Traitors. It's on Peacock. Peacock.com. It's free.
Traitor!